Good evening, everybody. Welcome to A Little Harmless Fun with Frank Rizzo and Chris Byrne, our toy expert. This is going to be a really fun evening. I've had the honor of spending some time talking with Frank and Chris during our various tech runs and so forth, and they are a lot of fun, and you're going to learn a lot about toys tonight. So I'm Jennifer LaRue. I'm the Director of Public Programs at the Mark Twain House and Museum, and I'm thrilled to see so many of you in the audience and so many friends. A lot of people saying kindly things in the chat already, so keep that up throughout the program and even after the program. One thing people don't necessarily know about Crowdcast is that the program is recorded and you can watch it anytime you want afterward, and you can continue chatting in perpetuity, so enjoy that. I don't want to keep you long because I want to get to our speakers right away, but I do have a couple of things to point out about Crowdcast, and then I want to tell you about a very exciting upcoming program at the Mark Twain House. So as I said, the chat is on the right-hand side of your screen, and a lot of you are availing yourselves of that already, so keep that up. But if you have a question for the question and answer period at the end of our talk, please post that down in that Ask a Question area at the bottom of your screen. That will make it a lot easier for us to field those questions for you. You can also look at the list of questions there and see if there's one that you want to upvote, so that if we have a question that 3 people or however many have asked, we can kind of start with that one. So please take time to ask questions there. And I do want to call your attention to that large greenish button at the bottom of your screen. That is an opportunity for you to donate to the Mark Twain House and Museum. Now, I know that you all very generously paid a registration fee for, thank you, Frank, for this evening's program, and we appreciate that very, very much. The Mark Twain House and Museum is a private nonprofit organization. We're not funded by the state or federal government. We're funded by money that we earn through programs such as this and through our house tour, which Chris remembers taking when he was a kid visiting West Hartford. We have been offering tours again since June, but on a much limited basis. And so that source of revenue has been, not quite what it used to be, which is all by way of saying, anything that you are able to share with us, $1, $5, whatever you can spare. I just want you to know on behalf of the staff and trustees of the Mark Twain House and Museum, anything is deeply appreciated. And we just really value your support and enthusiasm. Speaking of support and enthusiasm, we have a lot of programs at the Mark Twain House and Museum, and I will direct you to our website, which is marktwainhouse.org, to learn all about them. But I do want to call your attention to a really special one coming up on Friday, November 6th at 8:00 p.m. It's our virtual gala, and it is going to be so much fun. It's free, so you go and register, and you can take advantage of the whole shebang. We have the best lineup of speakers I have seen at any gala. We have Jimmy Buffett, who's going to sing a song, Brad Paisley, David Baldacci, John Grisham, Jodi Picoult, Ron Chernow, who wrote the biography of Hamilton on which the musical is based, and a bunch of other people as well. So please join us. There are going to be a lot of wonderful items for you to bid on in our auction, and it's just going to be a really fun evening and obviously a wonderful way to support the Mark Twain House. So hope to see you there. So thank you again for joining us. I'm going to introduce our dear friend, Frank Rizzo. And I mean that. Frank has been a great friend of the Twain House for so long, and we have been really enjoying doing this A Little Harmless Fun series with him. Frank is theater critic for Variety. He's covered the Connecticut arts and entertainment scene for more than 40 years, 33 of them for the Hartford Current. He also writes for the New York Times, American Theater Magazine, Connecticut Magazine, the Hearst newspapers of Connecticut, and many more publications and outlets. He's vice chair of the American Theater Critics Association, and you can check him out on his website, showriz.com.
Now, so.
So with no further ado, I'm going to disappear. I'll see you all for the question and answer area section. And welcome, Frank. Welcome, Chris. Have fun.
Well, Good evening and welcome to another casual conversation in our A Little Harmless Fun series. The emphasis tonight is on fun because we'll be talking about toys that we loved as children and remember with great nostalgia. as well as the hot toys for this coming Christmas. I think at the end of our talk, it will be very clear that indeed toys are us. Now, my guest is Chris Byrne, known affectionately as the Toy Guy. He's an independent toy analysis, researcher, and consultant, and you may have seen him talking about toys on programs such as Live with Kelly and Ryan, on Oprah, The Today Show, Good Morning America, the CBS Evening News, CBS This Morning. If CBS had an afternoon show, he'd be on that, and a host of other shows. By the way, at the end of our conversation, Jennifer will be posting a link to a YouTube clip from an appearance by Chris on a Live with Kelly show, which proved that sliming has its downfalls. Okay. So for tonight, we have him for not a short segment or a sound bite, but for an extended conversation. Chris began his career working on major toy brands in a variety of marketing and operation positions. He has also led the team that established the game Pictionary as one of the most popular games of its era. And thank you for that, Chris. I love Pictionary. He also is featured in the toy as a toy historian. A toy historian. He's a real person, but in toys. In the Netflix series, The Toys That Made Us. And his book on the most popular toys from the 1950s to the 1980s, Toy Time, gives the background on some of the all-time classic toys, many of them who we'll be talking about shortly. His list of credits and books go on, but I'll stop here so I can welcome Chris to the virtual Mark Twain House and Museum and for a little harmless fun. So cheers, Chris.
Cheers. Well, thank you. It's such a pleasure to be with you. And you know, really quickly, Jennifer alluded to the fact that my grandparents were lived in West Hartford at Quaker Lane and Jackson Avenue. And we would come to the Mark Twain House almost every summer. And because we loved it, my brothers and I loved it. And at that time, when you went into the bedroom, he would take the docent would take the cherubs off the bedpost and pass them around so all the kids could play with them. And I told that story yesterday to Jennifer, and I thought she was going to have a coronary, but I guess they don't do that anymore.
They don't do that anymore, no. But it's nice to know that that Twain has this connection with toys, with dolls, and still to this day, you know, those things mean a lot to us too. So what is it when we suddenly see an old toy, perhaps in a flea market or an antique store, that makes us want to touch it, hold it? Maybe we get a little bit verklempt. What's happening? It's just a toy, right?
Well, it's not just a toy. It's in the very classic sense, it's a totem. It is something that connects us to our childhood, to our youth, to a sense of fun, to maybe a specific memory, maybe something that really does connect us to ourselves. And I really believe that in many cases we become what we play. So it really is that time when there was a level of freedom, and play really serves three functions. You explore the world, have new experiences, and finally express yourself. And so there's something very elemental about toys that people really respond to. And it's so fascinating to me always to find out what somebody's favorite toys were when they were a kid.
So, well, what was your family like? And where did you grow up? And was it a toy-friendly family?
It was a play-friendly family. I grew up in Wilmington, Delaware. My parents were both teachers at the Tower Hill School, and I have 3 brothers and a sister. And we were it was a very creative household. And it was really just kind of, by today's standards, we kind of ran wild. My mom would turn us out of the house and just say, go, and come back for lunch. And the one thing you never said to my mother was, I'm bored, because she would say, no, you're not. You have your brothers, your toys, your books, figure it out. And so we always did. But it was really about play and creativity. And it really was very, it was fun. We had a lot of fun. My brothers and I still talk about the toys we played with and sometimes still play with them.
Now, the most obvious question of the night, what toys meant the most to you growing up, and do you still have them?
I still have my Matchbox collection, which
Oh.
was my Matchbox cars, which I loved because they were so many different things. You could play with them, you could collect them, you could sort them. I mean, now I understand why they were so interesting. But for me as a kid, they always seemed to reflect what was going on. I loved things like Creepy Crawlers, Whammo's Air Blaster. I have, this wasn't my original one, but this is Mr. Machine from 1960, who was an iconic Ideal toy. He actually became the icon for Ideal for many years.
Well, we'll talk about Mr. Machine because it's very personal to me, and I'll tell you.
I could tell that. I could tell that. It's like that. And you know what's funny? Because I don't know if you had it or not, but one of the things I find from adults is, they feel passionate about the toys as much about them if they didn't have them as if they did have them.
Well, it's not just about the toys you receive, but also the ones you didn't. So
right.
What toy did you really want that your parents didn't get you?
I don't remember. I think the one that I really wanted, I was trying to think about this, was Kenner had a thing called Panels and Girders, and you actually built buildings with it, and it was hugely successful. And I didn't get it for Christmas. Santa brought me other stuff, but my friend Roland had it. So when I was at Roland's house, we would play with it. So I still got the experience of playing.
Now, Mark Twain, who had a quote for every occasion, said, and this is Mark Twain here, my favorite bobblehead toy from Mark Twain, available for purchase on the website. He said, quote, "Nothing that grieves us can be called little. By the eternal laws of proportion, a child's loss of a doll and a king's loss of a crown are events of the same size." So let's talk about dolls first and those lost dolls of youth. Now, there are different types of dolls, I imagine, but I imagine baby dolls have been around since, like forever, right?
Yeah, baby dolls were really the original dolls, and they've been made out of many, many things. Certainly in the early years of the years of the 19th and even the early 20th century, what we think of as a manufactured doll was very, very rare, especially in the United States. Most dolls were handmade at home. The dolls we think of from that period are the very expensive German dolls, and for many, many years, those dolls were very much for the wealthy, and they came from Europe. There wasn't much of a fledgling toy industry at the time, so but dolls were a lot about nurturing. And then you jump forward into sort of the 50s, and you started to see paper dolls, which was like Betsy McCall paper dolls. And then Ruth Handler happened to be in Nuremberg, Germany, and saw a doll called Bild Lilly. And Lily was a sort of grown-up doll, and she brought it back to the United States, reinterpreted it, and it became Barbie. And 62 years later, we still have Barbie.
Let's hold off on Barbie because I want to get through some baby dolls.
All right.
They came out of in and out of fashion, and like you said, they really started in the post-war generation, the baby boomers, and we were given all these toys, all these different dolls, and the dolls, especially the baby dolls, kept on doing more and more things. Etsy Wetsy, Tiny Tears, Chatty Cathy, Rub-a-Dub Dolly, and their hair grew, and they talked, and they ate, and they wept, and then there was Baby Alive.
Baby Alive, yeah.
Can you tell our listeners something?
Well, yes, and I have as a young boy how I encountered Baby Alive with my brothers belonging to Kathy, who lived next door. So Baby Alive was really sort of the most alive doll that you could get. I mean, you mixed up this stuff that it kind of looked like, mashed peas gone bad, but you fed it to Baby Alive and she was articulated, so it looked like she chewed, and then it was, I hope I'm not going to ruin the magic for anybody, but there was a tube and it went down through the doll and came out in her diaper. Well, my brothers and I decided that what we would do would be feed Baby Alive some clothesline. And the clothesline went all the way through Baby Alive. And so we ended up holding the clothesline with Baby Alive chewing her way across the clothesline.
Oh, my goodness. Well, reading your book, I love some of these little known facts. And one of them is great for future trivia stumpers. Chatty Cathy's original voice was
You know what? I don't remember.
June Foray, who is the voice of Rocky the Flying Squirrel in the cartoon series Rocky and Bullwinkle.
Right. I do remember that now. It's been a while since I looked all this stuff up. But Chatty Cathy was the #1 doll in the United States from 1959 to 1965.
And then when they was Chatty Cathy .20, they got rid of, because she had more things to say, and you just couldn't stop that doll from talking. They got a new voice, Maureen McCormick, who played Marsha in the Brady Bunch.
Right.
So the book is filled with these like little gems. But let's go with what you were talking about earlier, Barbie, who really was the game changer. She didn't speak though. She didn't cry. She was just Barbie. That is until Stacy and Ken and the rest of her anatomically intimidating crib came along.
Well, Barbie, as I mentioned, was the first sort of peer or aspirational doll, so that a girl would aspire to being a teenager. When you're 7 or 8 and you may have older sisters or older cousins, and there's that magical year you turn 13. And Barbie, of course, was born Barbie Millicent Rogers in Willows, Wisconsin, but she moved to California, and she really epitomized for many years that sort of California surfer girl type of ethos. And she had she could go to school, but her career options were very limited. She could be a fashion model or she could be a bride.
But she's changed over the years. I mean, her dream house was fine, but then she, when it became clear that things weren't going her way, she entered the workplace.
She did. Barbie's had over 200 careers in her girl can't hold a job. No, but she's had more than 200 different careers, all of that very aspirational for that young girl who's, 3, 4, saying, what do you want to be when you grow up? But I think there was a couple of significant changes in Barbie over the years. First, in like 68, or with the rise of the ERA, there was a lot of backlash against Barbie. She's always been a lightning rod, but she started to evolve. She's always reflected the culture. And in 1985, some people may remember that We Girls Can Do Anything commercial. That really started the new iterations of Barbie. And today, Barbie isn't just that character. And this is a big difference, because people think of Barbie, and Barbie was a character, just one character for a long time. Well, now Barbie is a brand. So any doll that is 11 3/4 inches or changed can be a Barbie. So the question, Mattel asks this question all the time, is it Barbie or do we play Barbies? And it really depends on the kid. But now Barbie, they have different body types, different skin tones. It's a much more reflective of today's culture type of doll.
What were some of her jobs?
Well, my favorite is paleontologist, because that just makes me laugh. She's been an astronaut. She's run for president several times. Recently she's been a vlogger. I think this year her new career is a vlogger to do that. She's been a doctor. She's been a pet doctor. She's done a lot of things. I mean, I think if there's something that kids think about, they would want to do it. Barbie's probably already done it.
Pole dancing?
No.
Okay.
No. That's the adult comedy, which is a very different world from the child comedy.
Okay. So let's say I have an original Barbie in its original unopened plastic box in my attic.
Right.
Am I a happy person, financially speaking?
Well, financially speaking, you might be happy. A mint inbox Barbie from 1959 with the appropriate in-molding on the back of the neck can fetch as much as $6,000. And that's the highest I've ever seen for it. But on the other side is, well, that's a Barbie that never got played with. So that's kind of sad.
Smart parents would have gotten 2 Barbies.
Well, that's what happened in the 80s with the holiday Barbie. They bought so many of them that any Barbies on the secondary market aren't really worth anything.
Well, that's the other thing is the popularity of some of these dolls in terms of their value really sprung up with, I think, things like PBS's Antiques Roadshow, eBay.
Sure.
And so there was suddenly a consciousness, probably in the 80s, maybe a little bit later, that, gee, maybe we should save them or collect them or take better care of them because my grandkids can go on Antiques Roadshow or go on eBay and help their college tuition or something like that.
Right. It's not recommended as an investment strategy, but yes, most of the times when people find a doll or something that's worth a lot of money, it's because it got put away at some point or never given for Christmas and it just stayed in a box and nobody cleaned out their attic and suddenly they unearth it. That's really what happens with toys. But doll collecting is actually still the number 2 hobby of collecting in the United States. And it's
stamps, maybe?
Stamps is number 1. Yeah, stamps is still number 1.
So what did toys push out for number 2?
I don't know what they pushed out, but coins is number 3.
Okay.
In terms of popularity. So, but dolls, and I always make the joke that my mom and my grandmom collected Hummel figures. And we always made fun of them. But that's what we did. But a lot of today's parents are collecting Barbies, and Barbie collector is a huge part of their business because they're not going to play with those dolls, but they love them because of their outfits. They love them. The designers like Vera Wang and Christian Louboutin and all of those people who have designed for Barbie over the years. That is like the Hummel figure of the late 20th century.
Now, dolls, the popularity of dolls sort of have expiration dates. They seem to, with the exception of Barbie, seem to last like about a decade or so, and then, if they're lucky, and then they sort of fade out and another type of doll replaces it. And sometimes in the 60s and 70s, it was because each generation of a doll had a new function that we talked about. But what makes a doll last a little bit longer, or why don't these dolls stay a little bit longer if they're so beloved?
Well, most toys, a good toy brand has a life cycle of about 5 years, and that's popular because the children are aging up through it. I don't want my big sister's dolls. I want my own dolls. I mean, there's a little bit of that in it. There's always something that's new and novel coming along. There are things that are related to television shows or movies. When High School Musical came out, those dolls blew off the shelves. Things like Charlie's Angels dolls, all of these things, time passes. And if you really look at Barbie, she's nothing like she was 62 years ago. They've kept reinventing her. So each new generation of kids can say, hey, that's for me. That's really what they want.
That's smart. But except there was one doll phenomenon that sort of beat all the rest. And it sort of defies description, defies logic. And that happened in the mid-70s, and it was the Cabbage Patch doll. And this was the creation of the Ugly Baby doll. Can you explain that to me, Chris?
Well, I can't explain it to you. It was in the early 80s, 1981. Xavier Roberts created these dolls, and they were one of a kind artworks. And no toy company wanted to touch them. He thought we could sell them to a toy company. Well, he actually sold them or licensed them to a company called Coleco, which is in West Hartford, which was in West Hartford. It was in in an old, I think, elementary school down by Elmwood. Is that the shopping center down there? Yeah. It was down Quaker Lane down there. And they were known for making air hockey tables. And suddenly they get into making these dolls that nobody had ever heard of before. And it was one of those things that they couldn't get them out in the market fast enough. Somebody liked them. Somebody saw them on the media. and then it became a fad. And I tell people you cannot plan for a fad. It takes on a life of its own and is way beyond the toy industry. The market they want. In fact, people from high school were calling up my parents, seeing if I could help them get a Cabbage Patch doll.
And then they disappeared. Or at least
No.
Huh?
No, Cabbage Patch is still out there. It's still
Really?
it's made by a company called Jazzwares now, and you'll see Cabbage Patch and Cabbage Patch Minis. They're not the phenomenon they were, but they still are. They still are on the market.
Those like little ugly babies are still hanging in there. So
Right.
one more doll question, and then we'll move on to other stuff. Going back in time, were dolls the sole province of little girls? I know there was G.I. Joe and Steve Austin of the $6 Million Man, but going back in time, were there others, or was the male doll something relatively of the modern era?
Well, if we count the modern era, the 60s forward, yeah. I mean, I think that G.I. Joe, the guys at Hasbro looked at the success that Mattel was having with Barbie and said, there's got to be something for boys, but we can't call it a doll because dolls are for girls. So what are we going to call it? So they called it an action figure, very testosterone infused. So G.I. Joe G.I. Joe was a little taller than Barbie. He was 12 inches when he first came out. And it was really popular.
I have to be taller than the girl, right?
Right. Well, yeah, but she put on her heels and then she blew him away. But no, all kidding aside, it really is that very human need to connect to something and to project onto the doll your feelings, your anxieties, your hopes, aspirations. So it really is a very classic play pattern. We had My Buddy from Tonka. We've had other boy dolls over the years, and now, of course, there are dolls. Ken. Ken's been around since 1960, I think. 60. This is his 60th year, I think. Ken.
And like you said, action figures. The Star Wars grouping came out, and of course, my personal favorite is. He's my anxiety figure now more than ever. But our toys is now pretty gender open to gender, being less gender specific rather, as they were. In other words, are the easy bake ovens gender neutral, less pink, more purple maybe? Is operation not just for the boy doctors, but for girl doctors too? In other words, are toys more diverse? And I just don't mean a black doll or two, but are the kids in Candyland now Asian, Latinx, black, or not?
I think you're going to see a lot more diversity because one of the things the toy industry does do is it reflects the culture. And once you get rid of these sort of very stereotypical ideas of what gender means, you can open it up to almost anything. So I do think you're going to see girls play with trucks and boys play with dolls, and all these traditional stereotypes are going away. And the thing that makes me happy is that it's not really that the toys are changing, it's that the perception of the toys are changing, and that there are parents who are saying, well, that might be a traditional boy's toy, but my girl loves it. The costume designer, Tony Award-winning costume designer Greg Barnes loved his Barbies. He loved his Barbies. And when he ultimately got to design for Barbie, that was like a dream come true for him.
But still, there's not a great sense of reality to toys, like the game of life. There are no pandemics in the game of life, and black players don't get pulled over by police for no reason in the game of life. Sorry, I got carried away there. But like you said, they are more aware of modern times, and our kids more savvy now than we were.
I'm not sure that they're more savvy because child development hasn't expanded in the way that our sophistication has. But what they are is exposed to a broader diversity in culture. 2019 was the first year that more than 52% of preschoolers in the U.S. were non-white. So these kids are going to school and they're seeing diversity. They're seeing it around them and they take it in stride. And makes me very happy for what's going to happen when they hit high school and college, because time just changes. It just does. People are exposed to more. We have more opportunities. So kids are not being, in many cases, of course, that song "Carefully Taught" from South Pacific still applies in some cases, but in other cases, and many more cases, we're much more accepting of diversity and excited about diversity.
Yeah, because now we're moving outdoors now. Because I live in New Haven, a few blocks from the Yale campus, I have to ask about the invention of the Frisbee. And is the pie plate legend true?
It is true. It is the Frisbee Pie Company, and it was the students at Yale would buy the Frisbee pies and then throw the plates around. Now, how that got to Whammo out in the West Coast is sort of, there are many apocryphal stories about that, but Whammo took that and created the moon platter, which was which was the original name of the Frisbee, and then it became the moon, because Frisbee Pie Company owned the trademark, so they called it the moon platter, and then it evolved, and I guess Frisbee Pie Company went out of business. They bought the trademark for toys, and now we have the Frisbee.
And then there's another Connecticut created outdoor toy, the wiffle ball, which was created in around 53, I think, by David N. Mullany in his home in Fairfield, Connecticut, where he designed a ball that curved easily for his 12-year-old son, who is about 80 today. So that's another one. And now that I think about it, with wiffle ball and Frisbee and Legos and Coleco, and would you say Connecticut is sort of the heart of the toy industry in terms of classic toys, is where great toys begin in Connecticut?
Well, yeah, and right in New Haven is where the Erector set started. That's right. That's where A.C. Gilbert was. He was riding the train from New York City back to New Haven, and he was looking out at the wires and the stanchions that held up the wires, and that's when he began to conceive of the Erector set. At the same time, over in Europe, Meccano was being developed. So it really is. It's one of those things where you sort of get inspiration all at the same time. But this was the industrial age. Mm-hmm. And fun fact about Erector, the initial book, you open it up, it goes, "Hey boys." Because there was no question in like 1915 that this was a toy for boys, because it was about building.
And then there is the yin and yang of balls, the astonishing Super Ball in 1965, I think.
Right.
And its ineffectual cousin, the Nerf Ball, in 1969. I remember as a kid, the Super Ball creating quite a bit of havoc, not to mention a few broken windows and lamps and things of that nature. And unheeded warnings to do not play in the house.
Right.
Go outside and play with it, where, of course, you bounce it and it goes over 3 houses and you never find the ball again. So, those two balls really, I mean, when you think of it, creating a round object in new ways, and within just a few years, there were these two incredible creations.
Yeah, and both of them did things that are really classic toy business. A ball's not supposed to bounce as high as a Super Ball does. It's just not supposed to. And so that was magical for kids. I mean, to take it out, we had them too. You take it out and you smash it into the street as hard as you can to see how high it'll go. They would degrade over time, so you had to buy another one, but it's okay because they were under $1. And then Nerf broke the rule. You can't play ball in the house by being a big sphere of foam. And that was it. It really broke that rule.
Now I'm going to get personal here, Chris. Slip and slide. The cheapest toy, perhaps, that was ever manufactured. It was essentially a sheet of plastic, and you attach your garden hose to it, and you put it on the ground, and then with a running start, you flung your body onto it, with the expectation of slipping and sliding and not necessarily to having spinal cord injuries.
Right.
So was I just lucky, or did lawsuits follow by the bushel?
Well, it's so funny because that came out in the era where you didn't, if something went wrong or you hurt yourself playing with a toy, you didn't turn around and think to sue the toy company. If I hurt myself on a toy, my father would say to me, and I quote, "You don't have the sense God gave a plant," because it was really about me doing something wrong. Not that we assumed that the toy was wrong, but now if you buy, and they still make that type of toy, you should see the rules that come with it. So all of the stuff for litigation and but the assumption of risk. But it was fun. Come on, it was fun to run around on the lawn like that.
And how well you mentioned about taking risks and you're on your own, kid. But how about jarts? Congress banned jarts at the same time that they would not even consider banning assault weapons. Can you explain that? Because I love jarts.
I can't explain the rationale. I do think that as the culture became more litigious and people realized that they could make money from this, that it became a liability for the toy companies to have things that were dangerous. I mean, if you think about the original Easy Bake Oven, you could stick your finger in there where the light bulb was. Creepy Crawlers, which was a metal plate that you put in an open tray and made plastic things. It also had the advantage of you pick it up when it's hot and chase your brother around with it and threaten him with burning him. You can't do that anymore because once it's hot, it goes into this sort of locking thing and it won't open up again until it's cool enough. So again, it was, one of my father's toys, which I still have, was made by Gabriel. It was a lead soldier making kit, and you plugged it in and it had a little smelter and you melted lead pellets. You can see it on my Instagram. You melted lead pellets and poured them into a mold, and you made actual lead soldiers. And this was in the 20s. So we have different safety standards.
That was very good for those who wanted to enter the steel industry in Pittsburgh.
Right.
Under your chapter, batteries not included. Of course, you showed Mr. Machine, and that was the one toy I wanted and didn't get. But what made that toy so popular, and I have a theory, it was that damn theme song.
Oh yeah, this was the age of TV commercials. I mean, you think post-World War II, you have Wonderama, you have Howdy Doody, you in our area, you had Soupy Sales, you had all of these things because kids were suddenly a consumer market. So it had a great song, but he was also like this really cool robot. You wound him up, pretty magical, and all of the different gears went together and you could play with him, and it was just really, you saw it work, which was kind of magical. It wasn't just a mystery, you got to watch it. So it was just it was truly fascinating.
Do people ask you to sing the theme song ever, Chris?
They don't, and which is a good thing because I don't remember it, but I do remember it was an earworm at the time.
It really was, and it was sort of this marching song, Mr. Machine. Anyway, let's talk a little bit before we run too much out of time, because we want to have some room for questions and stuff, and that's board games. And you would think now that board games would be passé. But board games have always been around, if not always. It seems like they were here for way before the baby boom generation. And can you just riff a little bit about board games?
Well, I think they were way before the Magna Carta generation, to be honest, because it's a checkers, chess, all kinds of different games. I'm losing the Mancala. These are all old ancient games. Parcheesi, which was the ancient game of India, yes, was a craze in the 1890s, an absolute craze like we think of as Pictionary was later. But I think the reason that board games endure so much is because they are a social play experience like none other, because you're sitting across the table from somebody, you are socially playing, you are interacting. The designer, one of the great game designers, called them social lubrication. You can put people down. Brian Hirsch, you can see people down who don't know each other, give them a game, and suddenly they're interacting. And you've got classic games, which is, Candyland, Sorry, Clue. All of these are still made.
Shoots and Ladders, and actually, the one from my childhood is Stratego, which I actually kept with me whenever I moved. I didn't get rid of it. I can't say I really played it, but I didn't want to get rid of it.
Well, that's the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a touchstone to your childhood. You remember playing it, and we would play. My brothers and I would play Risk, which was a Parker Brothers game, and it took days. And like anything in our household, it became a contact sport when you brawled with somebody who did something you didn't like. But all of these games are just backgammon. You see, backgammon was very popular in the 19th century, chess and checkers, because it's a way to communicate with people in a very easy way.
So is there a wave of board enthusiasts, and are they just playing the old games, or is someone creating that new board game that will be a classic and will remain a classic?
We are actually in a new sort of golden age of board games. There was the board games of the 30s, 40s, 50s, which was, Sorry, Monopoly, Pit, all of those. Then in the 60s, we had all of the games like Mousetrap and Crazy Clock and Dynamite Shack and Kerplunk and all of those games. Most of those are still made too. But we've had a resurgence in skill and action games, things like Pie Face, which is where you get smacked in the face with a pie, but also more sedate games like Ticket to Ride. There is a game called Parthenon. All of these games, we call them gamer games because they might take days to play. And of course, things like Dungeons and Dragons have huge stories around them. And then of course, you've got to talk about Trivial Pursuit in 1983, which became a phenomenon. Came right at the time when people said adults don't play board games. That was followed by Pictionary in 84, 85, Taboo, Out of Context, all of these games, the adult games. And today, for a lot of adult board games, things like Cards Against Humanity and Exploding Kittens. And there's one other that's I'm drawing a blank on right now. But games are as elemental to human experience as dolls are, so they're never going to go away.
So let's talk about the chapter in the book on classic toys, and they sort of defy really almost any other category.
Yeah.
You mentioned Lego, again, Connecticut, but something like Viewmaster, Magic Ball, and Silly Putty. Three things that, how would you even classify them? And yet they became, part of the American vernacular.
Yeah. I mean, Viewmaster, I think, was introduced at the World's Fair in 1939 in New York. And it was the next generation of the Stereopticon, which had been very, very popular. And that it allowed you to see pictures in 3D, which was at the time, you have to consider this is before television. Movies are there, but it was home entertainment. And for a lot of people who didn't travel very far, the Viewmaster reel let you see the Taj Mahal, the Eiffel Tower in 3D, almost as if you were there. So it was we forget the sense of wonder that something like that created for people. The Magic 8-Ball was just, people have loved that kind of thing. Oh, what's the future going to be? Like the Ouija board or, Zoltar or any of those things. It's just really, really, again, a very elemental human thing. And I forget the third one you mentioned.
Silly Putty.
Silly Putty. I mean, it's just a manipulative. It's a compound. There is a company right now, Crazy Aaron's Putty. They make all kinds of putty. And it's just very much, it's contemplative, it's play. And talking to art therapists, we know that as you manipulate compounds, you are releasing chemicals that help you calm down in your brain. So it's just, and it's that fascinating. And it's all down to, look what I can do, even if I'm just stretching a bit of putty. It's fascinating.
Well, it's like the little things that we spin now.
The fidget spinners that we had a couple of years ago. Yeah.
It's a stress reducer, I guess. So I think that's one of the subliminal attractions for it. Of course, Whammo doesn't really spend a lot of money on actually because I'm thinking of the hula hoop. Again, right. Slip and slide, piece of plastic, and they'll charge you whatever. And then a hula hoop, a plastic circle. I'm sure it cost them pennies.
Right.
And it became a phenomenon that is sort of unprecedented.
It was an iconic phenomenon, and the two guys who Spud Melman and I forget the other guy off the top of my head who created Whammo used to go back into the shed behind one of their houses and come up with an idea, and they would take it down to the beach in LA, and if the kids who were hanging out there seemed to like it, they would go and make it. That was marketing research for Whammo. But the hula hoop really, it just hit at the right time. It hit at the time with people gyrating their hips and doing the twist, and oh my God, the culture's going to go to heck. Elvis was going to bring down, all of the culture, and it was sort of an allowed way to swivel your hips for teenagers. And then, of course, it became something that was a competition and all kinds of elements over the years. Some people may remember the Shoop Shoop hula hoop, which just had beans in it. That's all it did, but it made a noise when you hula hooped. And now there's light up hula hoops. It's a classic play pattern.
And I actually remember when Mr. Potato Head, really you would use a potato.
Oh yeah.
It was only probably quickly after that is when they created the plastic potato, probably because kids were using a lot of potatoes.
Well, also, if you remember, Mr. Potato Head, it was the little body. It had a spike on the top of it, that you put into. It came with the original one came with a styrofoam cut out of a potato. But you were going into the potato bin in your kitchen and getting a potato and jamming it on a spike, and so spikes just aren't don't hit the safety standards these days.
Speaking not just safety standard, but maybe planetary standards when it comes to Uncle Milt's ant farm.
Right.
Let's bring ants into the house.
Right.
I never had one, and it always mystified me why this was popular and why parents allowed it.
Well, first of all, you had to send away for the ants, and they were pretty much kept in together, and they would ultimately die. But the thing about the ant farm was kids got to watch something that really only happened underground and out of sight. So it was that fascination with the world around them. That's the new experiences I was talking about, where they can see all this stuff happening. They can see how the ants do this. They can see how they bury the dead ants, which they do. So you can really see how the ants create this, what's hidden from view in the normal world, in the physical world, is now revealed to kids through the ant farm.
Huh, fascinating. So did everything change when electronics came in? Of course, it started very slowly with Pong and Pac-Man and the arcade games, but pretty soon things got very, very sophisticated to where we are now. Is the world of toys still in the classic sense of the word of the way we remember the toys? Or is it really like 90% electronic games?
One of the things I like to say is the electronic games just made the toy box bigger, because little kids, their cognitive development, they still need the manipulatives. They still need that physical play. They need that interaction. It's one of the things I'm concerned about during COVID, where kids are all separate from one another. They don't get that kind of play. Electronics can do things like bring games to life in a different way, but it's still the essential play. The electronic toys that have survived have been the ones where the electronics serve the play, rather than the ones where it's a watch me toy. You don't want to be able to like turn on the toy, go have a sandwich, come back and say, oh yeah, that was fun. Play is about being engaged.
So what's the future of toys? Is it going to be virtual experiences where you really are in Chutes and Ladders, or you really are surrounded by Candyland, or you really are taking a risk with the global destruction? So what's the future of toys?
The future of toys is going to be very much like this, the future, like the present of toys. You're mentioning virtual reality. Nobody's really solved that for the toy industry yet, because if the Oculus glasses, it really does isolate the child in a world. It's pretty magical, but kids don't want to play that all the time. I've just seen a ball that is connected to an app, but it's still a ball. You can play different games with it. It's kind of fun and interactive, but it's still a ball. So we still need that manipulative play, that social play, because we're human beings and we haven't evolved out of all of that.
So what's the hot toy or toys coming up this Christmas?
Okay, so one of the hot toys, I love this. I first saw this in Hong Kong last year. This is called Squeaky the Balloon Dog.
Oh, it's like a Dick Koons.
That's exactly it. Exactly it. It actually is an interactive dog, and we've seen a lot of interactive pets. But I just love this because of the form factor, and it's one I would have in my house.
What's it called?
It's called Squeaky the Balloon Dog. You can see him behind me. We've also got this guy, this is Gotta Go Flamingo, which combines electronic pets with the evergreen play pattern of pooping, which nobody's ever going to get rid of. And I got to show you one more because this happens to be behind me. This is one that I first saw it in Hong Kong. The video from that's on my Instagram. It's called Go-Go Bird. And Go-Go Bird, you can't really tell, is a radio-controlled bird. It actually flies. It's under $40. It's from a company called Zing. And when it was at the Hong Kong Toy Fair, it was really subject of a bidding war. And I'm so glad Zing got it because they were able to engineer it and bring it in at a price point that's under $40. It's pretty cool.
Does it migrate every season?
It does. It might migrate into the toy box if it gets too cold outside,
or into a tree, and that's where it stays.
Yeah, play in an open area. I've lost over the years. I've lost many things on roofs and whatever. Yeah, that's where it happens.
So do you have a record of what the most expensive toy ever sold for?
I don't. I know that there was one Hot Wheels collectible car that they claim is worth about $150,000. But the problem with when you say something like that is it's only worth that if somebody's going to pay it. So I don't think that there's been a lot. Again, with the collectible market, that's a thing unto itself. I mean, back in '96, we had, with Beanie Babies, Peanut the Blue Elephant, I think, was going for $2,000. It was a $7 toy, and that was like the tulip craze back at that time, because the market did fall out of the bottom of Beanie Babies. So I always tell people, don't count on, as we said, toys as an investment vehicle.
Oh, wait a minute. Kermit is saying that we should take some switch her over to maybe Jennifer so we can maybe take a few questions.
Sure.
Jennifer, come
where
back.
Are you, Jennifer? Where are you?
Excuse me. Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking at my Viewmaster from 1964. Oh my goodness, that was so much fun. Thank you both so much for, walk down memory lane for me. I have to say there aren't a whole lot of audience questions, because I think what was happening was we were all thinking of questions, and then you guys would talk about the very topic we were going to ask about, the next thing. So I think you covered.
There's one that I wanted to hit on that I thought that maybe someone would ask about, and that's Dungeons and Dragons.
Right.
Which is a different type of I don't want to call it a toy engagement, but certainly a board engagement.
Right. It's a role-playing game, and it's basically a story where you take on different characters and you act out different characters, and you have a dungeon master who sets the scene, and then you roll and you play. And these games can go on for days and weeks, and they really are very popular among teens. But they also, Hasbro, which owns the company, has done some really creative things. Like if you're a fan of the TV series on Netflix, Stranger Things, they've created a whole Stranger Things Dungeons and Dragons set, which takes less time to play, but really gives you that same experience. So it's pretty cool.
So there are new shows that exist now, or they're coming up, that have the toy tie-in, like Game of Thrones, even though that's a little bit more of the but it has dragons.
Game of Thrones has a very strong collectible action figure fan base. When I was in Germany at the Toy Fair in January this year, there was a huge the throne, the sword throne was there, and there was a line every day for people to get their pictures taken in it. So it was pretty amazing. And but mostly right now, movies are really challenged. So a lot of the toys are coming from TV. If you've got a preschooler, you probably know Paw Patrol. You may know Peppa Pig. You may know PJ Masks. So all of these things that inspire narrative and narrative play very often have toys.
Well, I'm waiting for the Mary Berry action figure from the Great British Baking Show.
Okay. Well, I actually bought a collectible Barbie this year because it reminded me of Mrs. Maisel. So there you go.
Now, Mrs. Maisel would be a great doll because of all the 50s fashion.
Oh, the clothes are amazing.
And it's all about the clothes, let's face it. But, certainly a show like that. And, the more I'm thinking about it, the more shows I'm envisioning that, there could be some sort of a doll or action figure or board game, from it. Actually, I remember in the 70s, the Brady Bunch and the Partridge Family, they all had board games that was named after them. I think Kojak had a board game.
Well, think about it. It's very inexpensive to create a board game. The game mechanics are pretty much the same, whether you're playing with the Brady Bunch or Kojak. They're basically chase games with different things that upend the process. So it's very easy to print that. It's paper and ink. You take on the popular thing, and it's really fun. I saw a question in here about controversial or banned toys, which I think is always really I think it's always an important thing to talk about because, the way I always talk about it is you as the parent are the gatekeeper for what comes in your house. So if you don't like Barbie, then don't have Barbie in your house. But I've been embroiled in these controversies over the years. In fact, I got in a fight with the Christian Science Monitor when Barbie created a Tokidoki collector Barbie, and Barbie had a tattooed sleeve. And the reporter was, we're telling children to do this and da-da-da-da-da. And I just said, well, Barbie's plastic. It's not like she's going to come to your house and drag your daughter down to the harbor and force her to get a tattoo. So it's all kinds of things like that over the years. And because people project a lot onto these toys they're unresolved issues. And in terms of banned toys, it's mostly because of safety issues these days.
Right. Now, of course, another classic is Monopoly, and that started a long, long time ago, and yet they keep on reinventing Monopoly in so many different ways. I'm half expecting a new edition of social media Monopoly.
There have been a lot of different Monopoly games. There have been faster playing Monopoly games. The original Monopoly game was played on a round board, and it was the reason it was the size of the kitchen table that the inventor cut the oilcloth around to create the board. I'm not sure. Oh, that's the Strong Museum in Rochester, which is definitely a trip that's worth it if you're into toys. The Strong Museum of Play in Rochester, New York, definitely worth a trip. They are open again.
Cool. One more toy I have to, at least throw out at you for a few comments because, again, one of a kind figure. And what is this, anyways? That's Gumby. What is Gumby? And yet, it's so iconic, and it's, he's stayed. Of course, Eddie Murphy certainly helped, but Gumby. Had a powerful pull for reasons I can't explain.
Well, he was once a little green ball of clay, but no, I mean, that's the song. That song I can do, but I'll spare you. But I think that Gumby was inherently innocent, but also kids really related to Gumby and Pokey and the best friend and Sluggo the bad guy, and it really, in a very simple way, addressed all the traumas that preschool children and early grade school children play. And through Gumby's overcoming it, kids vicariously overcome stuff. And that's one of the really important parts of doll and figure play, which is you get to work out those issues in a safe and play setting. So you actually have some kind of experience with those when they come up in real life.
One of our people asked about Stretch Armstrong. I'm not familiar with Stretch. Who is Stretch?
Stretch Armstrong came from Cap Toys, and I want to say it was the early 80s. I'm not sure off the top of my head. Stretch Armstrong was an action figure, and he was filled with beads and jelly. And basically, he could stretch up to 3 times his size. And of course, immediately, every boy on the planet wanted one. Not because they loved it and wanted to nurture it, because they wanted to stretch it and see if they could break it. And the one thing you didn't do with Stretch Armstrong was leave it on the back of your car, that ledge of your car, in the sun, because he would dry out and crack.
Oh, so not a good end to Stretch. Someone mentioned Pee Wee Herman too, and again, taking children's, whether it be Bozo the Clown, Ronald McDonald, and certainly children's favorite and adults as well, Pee Wee Herman, and he was all about toys. He was all about fun. He was all about being a kid.
He was all about play and that sort of what I call a loud naughtiness, which is so important to kids, and pushing the envelope and just being free and silly. And I actually worked on that product when it was at Matchbox back. I want to say it was like Toy Fair of 1986 when the dolls were being introduced, and we had little versions of him that we sent out to everybody that we could think of that said Toy Fair is coming, little sandwich boards for Pee Wee Herman. So I remember spending days putting sandwich boards on Pee Wee Herman action figures. But it was huge because, it was that whole sense of magic and silliness and talking to the chair and all of that stuff that kids love and they could relate to.
And someone mentioned a super goop. And again, it goes into that classification of things that that are icky and fun and slimy and things like that, including, well, we'll talk about that in a second.
Yeah, compounds are great. Play-Doh. Play-Doh's from 1956. And before that, it was all just sort of oil-based clay like sculptors used. And Play-Doh, by the way, started out to be a wallpaper cleaner. And then they turned it into something. It was all white, and then they added colors, and you're off to the races. So Play-Doh is it's still made, it's still popular. The most popular sets are the ones kids can make food with. Interesting.
And I guess a wrap-up question, and that is, your house is on fire, Chris. You can only save one toy. Which are you going to leap to save?
Listen, I will be grabbing Mr. Machine and my first edition of Bleak House, and everything else can burn up.
How tasteful.
Well, if I had to choose, that would be it.
Yeah, no, of course, especially if it's a first edition. But a first edition of Mr. Machine, I mean.
Yeah, it is that too.
Interesting question. Are there first edition, second editions of things that have become iconic? And how do we know if we have a real one or a cheaper version of it?
Most of that has to do with dolls and action figures. The fans who really know that kind of stuff. For dolls, there are so many. For both of them, there's so many online resources and value guides you can find to see if what you've got is worth money. If, as I hope, the toy was played with, it's probably not worth much more than the sentimental value. But if you find something, especially with dolls, they will have markings on the back of the neck that will tell you when it was made and who made it and what lot it's in. That's very important. And there are serious collectors of action figures and dolls who can quote you chapter and verse on that.
And I said it was the last question, but we skipped over a couple of your chapters, but I think we should at least acknowledge the wonderful world of train sets.
Oh, yeah.
And that whole world, especially for boys, because we spent such a long time talking about dolls. So here's one for the boys. And are train sets still popular? Trains,
yes and no. Trains, of course, Lionel being one of the big train manufacturers from 1900. They started in 1900. That's when everything was on trains and kids saw trains in their daily life. Kids don't see trains that much anymore. We've got Thomas the Tank Engine, who was popular, but largely because he was a character, not necessarily because he was a train. Because kids don't see trains. Trains sort of morphed into cars with Hot Wheels in 1967. But of course, there is a huge collector market for, and train fans are huge. And I got to go into the archives at Lionel, and the stuff they've got there just blow your mind. Even, in fact, during the war, during the Second World War, they made a cardboard train set because they could not get the allocation of metal to make the trains, and that's actually worth quite a bit of money if you can get a good one.
I wonder what the equivalent would be. I guess the Segway toy never took off.
No.
Never took off. Things like city bikes is more common. I guess subways, not really. I guess, like you said, it's really planes and automobiles, not trains.
You'll see a lot of trains in Europe and in Asia where train travel is much more part of the daily life there. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Chris, on behalf of Mark Twain and Homer Simpson.
Perfect match.
And I'll switch you over to Jennifer to wrap up tonight.
Well, I just want to thank you both so much for a really entertaining and informative evening, and I learned so much. I just have a quick question for you, Chris. If we kind of want to, if our interest has got piqued, in addition to your books, which I want everybody to buy, and there are links in the chat for purchasing those, a couple of your books, are there online forums or Facebook groups, or where would you recommend those of us who want to continue the conversation go?
You can come see thetoyguy.com where I post a lot of stuff up there. Follow me on Instagram or Facebook. But I think that if you have an interest, if you are really specifically interested and you want to find, Hot Wheels, there are Reddits and all kinds of online groups and Facebook groups that you can join. And really for the fans, and especially for people who want to know history, is great. I highly recommend the strongmuseum.org because there's so much history there. They actually have a toy that they never show anybody, which is a model electric chair that really works. And they still don't know how they got that and who made that and why. But so that's one of the oddities of the toy museum. But
the town never picked up on that one.
No. But so I think poke around online and put in your interests, and I think you'll be surprised at how many people share those interests and have lots of wonderful stories about those toys.
Well, thank you. That's awesome. So please, people, check out the links in the chat to purchase some of Chris's books and join us. Yes, I was just going to say, I just posted the video that Frank promised at the beginning. You can check it out at your leisure. You will not regret watching it. You might want to watch it more than once. I know that I did today.
No toy guys were harmed in the making of that video.
No. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. This has been a real pleasure.
Thank you. I hope you'll come back again, Chris, when you can do it in person.
I would love to.
But you're not allowed to play with the cherubs from the Mark Twain bed.
It'll just be a memory. It'll just be a lovely memory.
Great. Thank you both so much. And thank you, Frank and Chris. And I hope we'll see you all again soon. And I hope to see you at our gala.
Thank
November
you.
6th. Thank you. Good night. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.